Today I'm covering how to make a cold call value statement as a tech sales or B2B sales rep. The goal of value statements is to simplify cold calling and make it incredibly easy to the point where it almost seems too good to be true. But all I ask is don't knock it till you try it, because I've taught this technique literally to hundreds of reps and watched it immediately improve their results. So in this video, I'm going to be covering how you can easily start delivering your own value statements, why they're superior to cold call scripts, and then I'm going to deliver a live role play of a value statement in action. So let's get into it. So where does a cold call start? All cold calls start with the cold call opening when the prospect says hello. And a lot of what's taught out there revolves around pattern interrupts or permission-based openers. I mean, I literally see videos on YouTube that are 18 minutes long on how to open a cold call. I want to make cold calling simple and easy. It shouldn't give you anxiety to pick up the phone. So instead, I choose to deliver what I call an assumptive formality. The goal of an assumptive formality is to elicit a formality back. Basically, just get them to give you a formality so that you can get into why you're calling. So this is what it sounds like. Hey Jim, this is Connor Murray calling from X company. How are you? You can say, how are you? How have you been? Find the words that are comfortable for you, whatever helps you elicit a formality. And the key technique to do that is to have a downward sloping inflection that signals you're here to play ball. It signals that you're not here to waste time. Just give me a formality back and then I'm gonna go right into why I'm calling. I've been in enterprise software sales for 6 years. I still say, how are you to this day, because it's what helps me elicit a formality from the prospect and doesn't even give them a chance to think, because now I'm immediately gonna take control of the call. That takes us into the next part of the value statement and why it's different than cold call scripts. We have some work to do now that we're taking control to convince the prospect that we may be worth spending more time with. And that starts by answering 3 questions. Simply who you are, why you're calling, what you want. You don't need to overcomplicate it. So instead of how a lot of SDRs are trained to lead off with a prepared question or two, value statements are under the premise that the burden of proof is on us to deliver value first before we start asking any of our own questions. This also prevents the call from going in a bunch of unexpected directions. When you deliver this who, why, what on every single cold call, you know what you're gonna do on every single cold call when the prospect says hello. There's a huge reduction in anxiety once you start doing this. And all of these are only a line or two. They're really easy and really replicable. So the who you are, you don't need to overcomplicate. You can try and make it sound a little more targeted based on the persona you're calling, but you say something like, I'm just reaching out because I'm part of the team that supports X company regarding HR and payroll applications. If you're calling someone in HR and that's what you support, say that. If you're calling someone in finance, say back office finance applications. You don't need to overcomplicate it. Another way you can make it a little more targeted is if you know what industry this persona is, you can say, I'm part of the strategic manufacturing team that supports X and Y application, or the strategic retail team, or you can leave out strategic. Again, it's just finding what's comfortable, but the who is just one line. Then you go into why you're calling. This is the most important part, and you really have to answer 2 questions succinctly. What priorities or challenges do you solve, and how do you solve them? There should be lots of material at the company you work for that helps you plug in that what priorities and challenges do you solve and how you solve them. And they should be pretty repeatable every time you make a cold call. This is why I like to make lists up front with personas that match each other, so that I can just make one value statement, plug in those words that are gonna be relevant, those priorities and challenges relevant to that list of personas, so that I can just go down the same list without having to stop and rechange my script and figure out who I'm calling. I want my list to be as similar, have as many similar characteristics as possible. Then once you drop that, and I'll give an example at the end of the video, you go straight into telling them what you want, which is time on their calendar. A lot of SDRs struggle and hesitate to ask for what they want, and they wait too long into the call to do that, and oftentimes just get hung up on after a 5-10 minute conversation that sounded great, and then boom, send me an email, and they lose them. And here's the thing, most prospects, whether they realize it or not, actually prefer you to state their intent earlier on in the call, because a lot of times when you're calling these people, they're in the middle of their workday, they have their own call they're about to jump on. You're calling someone in finance, they're trying to rip some spreadsheet together to present to their boss, and you're trying to talk to them about software. They would rather you ask them if they're free next week. The other thing it does is makes clear what your call is about. A lot of reps just start asking questions and the prospect is confused as to where this is even going. It's important to state your intent up front, and this is what gives you a non-zero probability of booking the meeting. When you actually ask for time on their calendar, you're giving yourself a shot on net, a chance of booking the meeting. The more times you do that over the course of 100 or thousands of cold calls, the more probability probabilities that you have of booking a meeting. So now I'll rip through a quick example of a basic value statement and then show you, once you deliver who you are, why you're calling, and state your intent, why there are only now 3 possible outcomes, and really only one of them do you actually have to be prepared for. Hey Jim, this is Connor Murray calling from X Company. How are you? Good. How are you? Good. I'm just reaching out because I'm part of the team that supports Y Company regarding supply chain management applications, and we usually work on priorities related to supply chain planning, inventory management, and procurement, usually with our tools that match supply and demand plans together and unify the whole planning process by eliminating a lot of the side point solutions that you use. And I know I kind of called you out of the blue here, so I'm more just looking to set aside some time next week just to get introduced and aligned with your priorities going forward. How's your calendar look on Wednesday or Thursday? So that's just a general example. In practice, you should probably better match those priorities with the outcomes I listed, but I more just wanted to show you the framework of how I took control of the call, and then within 30 to 45 seconds, I answered those 3 questions. I told them who I was, why I was calling, like how I can help them, what priorities I solved, how we generally solve them, and then stated my intent, what I want. Now that I have physically gotten that out, there's only 3 outcomes here that can possibly happen, and 2 of them are pretty self-explanatory. Best case, the guy makes it easy and says, yeah, sure, I'm free next week, and he might have a question or 2, but I generally recommend wrapping it up quickly, sending a strong agenda. You can do little things to increase show rate, like asking them to accept on the phone. Sometimes you can be like, hey, my email's having a little trouble, like I just wanna make sure it went through. That's a little tip there. If they say no, like hard no, like nope, not interested, take me off your list, click. There's not really much you can do there other than just make your next call. It's just a data point, it's fine. So a yes or a no are pretty self-explanatory what you do. So after you go who, why, what, now in your head, the only outcome you really need to be prepared for is some form of objection or a question they throw back at you, which I also consider an objection. And my quick strategy here is to double down and sell the time. You're selling the meeting. You don't have to start immediately asking them in-depth questions. Double down once more. You have one more bullet in the chamber. I'll link to a video where I go more in depth on that. But you acknowledge their concern and then tell them it makes sense to meet anyway. And that's what gives you a second shot on net, generally within 60 seconds of the call. That's going to give you a decent probability of booking the meeting, especially when you get good at this. Now, if they still push back after you doubled down and sold time, but they're not hanging up, maybe they have some legitimate objection that they're giving you that they want to talk through before they agree to a meeting, that is when you can start opening up the conversation a bit, maybe asking some questions, peeling back the onion. But I still think you want to be careful and not do too much of that on the cold call, because sometimes that's when you lose them. They say, send me an email. In their head, they're like, well, aren't we meeting and speaking right now? What will we speak about in the future? But that's a big difference between value statements and cold call scripts is I take control and deliver value first. The burden of proof is on me as the cold caller before I start asking any open-ended questions. So I hope this got you thinking. If you want to work with me personally on developing your own value statement that's specific to your role, the company, and the personas you target so that you know you have a solid framework every time you're calling someone and the calls just aren't going to waste, there's a link in the description. You can book a call with me and we can work through that. But hopefully this is something to get you started. So hope this helped. If it did, hit the like button and I'll see you on the next one.